What's up, guys? You need to meta here with Cat again, doing Piper Catsith. Shout out to the guy who bought all the Pipers on the internet.
You guys already know. You guys already know that we like Piper. And someone, maybe a few months ago now, introduced Catsith to the Tango Plant Town Discord in general, and then people started taking off with the idea. And it's a level 1 card that's a lot of fun to use with Piper. But we're going to start with the Piper stuff here. Of course, we're running Piper. We have to run triple Piper and double Kinka to just do Piper things. But the synergy here is with this random Fabled card, Catsith. It's level 1, it's a tuner, it's a light. When it's discarded, you can pop a face-up card on the field. It is mandatory. Keep that in mind. But
you can't. It's discard or destroy.
Yeah.
When it's discarded, destroy.
Yeah. So it is. It's a level 1, so that's obviously where the Piper synergy comes in. But there's a surprising amount of other good chaos synergy it has, and
it's a light. It's a tuner. It's
also just a lot of fun to have actual interruption in a normal Piper deck, because sometimes if you don't have a chaos monster, you're just doing nothing. So that's where Catsith comes in. The card that helps Catsith do anything is Fabled Kushano, which is a level 3 fiend, and you can get it off of Tour Guide. Essentially, all Kushano does is, when it's in your graveyard, you can discard a Fabled in your hand to add this card to your hand. So discard a Catsith, add this to your hand, and then Catsith pops something. It's technically a +1 interaction. Ideally with this deck, if you have Tour Guide in your opening hand, you're just going to immediately go for Catsith or for Kushano just to set up like a Leviathan Dragon, detach Kushano, and then any future turns, if you draw Catsith, you have a free pop in grave now. Also, Tour Guide into this is a light and a dark, so it also sets up a chaos monster. You try not to banish this if possible, but you got to do what you got to do to advance the game state.
And then if they max you play Sangan.
Yeah, then you just go for Sangan. Because, of course, you have so many targets with Piper and all of its buddies. So that's kind of the core package of synergy there. It's a lot of fun.
Have you ever thought of cutting Sangan?
I've thought about cutting Sangan. I've also thought about adding a second Kushano. Just for each Tour Guide to have a target. I personally enjoy running another normal summon that actually does something other than Tour Guide, so I run double T-King. 3 felt like a bit too much. In its place, I ran a single Cyber Dragon. This is so that if you Piper and then don't draw into a Chaos Monster or it's not live, you can at least have a chance of doing something proactive that isn't another normal summon. So
his deck has the opposite problem of most Chaos decks, where it has not enough normal summons sometimes. So the Thunder Kings kind of help with that.
Right. If anything, sometimes this deck has a problem with getting darks in its grave because of all the lights you're playing between Piper and Catsith and Cyber Dragon and all that stuff. But you do currently max out on the Chaos package with the BLS and the triple Sork. You'll see it later, but we are running discard traps, so if possible, you can always discard one of these if it's ever dead. But
early game discarding Chaos Sorcerer is not a bad play.
It's not. So that's it, but this is another boss monster deck. Piper draws you into your boss monsters and also fuels them. It's really fun to just slap chaos monsters around. That's about it. You also run several hand traps here, at least defensive ones. Gorz, Double Trag, and Fader. Fader's just good with Piper. Trag is good in traditional Piper decks because you typically have a full hand. This variant of Piper, sometimes you don't with your discard traps. So I've considered cutting it. I've considered cutting it to 1. So far, I still like it because you can choose whether or not you use your discard traps or whether it's worth it to just soak damage and drop that card. If you don't like it, though, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to cut it for maybe more copies of Battle Fader if you want more defensive hand traps.
We're not trying to do Kai's things with the Faders, though. Right?
No, we're not. It's purely defensive. And Catsith is a level 1 tuner, so you can Fader Catsith, make a formula if you really need to. To round out the monster lineup, it's 28 monsters in my current list. Regular actual hand traps. Of course, maxing out on Valor because it's best friends with Piper. Singleton Maxx just because even though you draw a lot of cards in this deck, sometimes you want to slow your opponent down.
Having the option off Sangan is important, yeah.
So that's really all the logic is there. It's very fun. The spell lineup is very limited in this deck. It's all a bunch of good one-ofs. Allure, you do run enough darks to run Allure pretty effectively. And if you have a dead dragon hand, this is a good way to suck it up. If you have double Kinka you're not doing anything with, it's great for that. Sork, dead in hand, all sorts of stuff. Singleton Book to put down people's T-Kings. Mindcon, because you are on a lot of tuners. Kushano is a level 3 tuner. Catsith is a level 1 tuner, in addition to your Veilers or bringing something back with Kinka-Byo. So this card is very live in this deck, anything after turn 1 typically. Not to mention, you can just take someone's T-King, do what you need to do, sync with it, or summon your own T-King, make 4 with it, or with their Tengu or something. It's just a versatile card in this deck. And then
Trinity.
The Trinity there. A lot of fun.
No MSTs in the main?
No MSTs in the main, though, because we are playing triple Wing Blast to synergize with Catsith. And I felt like having too much removal was not great. You do side the MSTs typically. Main interaction here is that you can discard Catsith, spin a card with Wing Blast, and then Catsith will trigger to pop another face up. So if they have a back row and a monster, it's a good way to go 2 for 2 in a proactive way. Similarly, you can also discard Kushano, so that then on your turn you can Kushano, discard Catsith, do whatever, or discard a Dead Dark, Dead Light, whatever you need to help fuel your Chaos boss monsters. Pretty versatile, and given that this is a Piper deck, you're often going to have plenty of cards in hand, so even if you don't have a synergistic card to discard with it, it's normally not back-breaking to make it work. Otherwise, we are just playing some other good traps. Mirror Force, Dustshoot, and TT. I was originally on Double Warning and No Judgment, and I ended up cutting them all for the same reason, which is just life points. Given that you are still relying a lot on defensive hand traps for your security, I personally felt like taking the life points from Warning or Judgment wasn't worth it. If you take an early game Judgment, drops you to 4K, your Gorz and Trags are suddenly much worse, typically. But does it work? Sure, absolutely. You could definitely cut a card or two, cut this Mirror Force, cut something else of your choice, put in a Judgment, put in Warnings, whatever you want to do. But my personal preference is to not main deck them. So that is it for the main deck. It's fun chaos spam. It gives Piper another angle to do Piper things, really. It's just, I've always wanted a Piper deck that can draw traps and do something with them, and this feels like a good fit. Going into the extra deck, we have Formula, which you make very easily, either with Kinka for any of your level 1 tuners, or even the Fader and then one of them. We play 2 level 4s, the Armory Arm, as well as the Unicorn. It was a toss-up between whether or not I played Unicorn or Fabled Ragin, which is a 5. I didn't feel like I wanted room for both. Ultimately, I settled on Unicore just because it's the more impactful card, potentially. With the discard traps, you have the way to modulate your hand size down. With Piper, you potentially have the way to modulate it up. It's a good control card if you can get it to work. Otherwise, it's just kind of neat. Otherwise, only 1/5 and 1/6. Catastor and Brio to round that out. Because typically the only way you're making these is either with Mindcon or like if a T-King survived and you need to convert it. Similarly, this is for Cyber Dragon or another Mindcon steal. Into 7s, we have Arcanite, Ancient Fairy Dragon, and Black Rose. This is probably the most used synchro spot in the deck, aside from Formula, just because triple Chaos Sorcerer lends itself to one of these very well. You can flex some of these cards just because being light tuners and fiends gives you a pretty wide synchro pool. You could also run Ancient Sacred Wyvern, which is a great card, don't get me wrong. I ultimately felt like Arcanite was more consistent. What's that level 7 Archfiend card name?
Chaos King Archfiend?
Chaos King Archfiend is also technically a card you can run with your Kushano and then something else. Or you have a lot of 7 options in this deck. Ultimately, I feel like these are the most reliable, especially Ancient Fairy, given that Gravekeepers kind of skunks this deck. You need a way to be able to make it and search out Closed Forest from your extra deck. So that's the logic there. Going into your 8s, which you can kind of sort of consistently make with Kinka into Tuner into Chaos Sorcerer, or Gorz into Tuner or something like that. It's just Stardust scrap. If you want to be really cheeky, you can run Chaos Goddess. I find it's a little too inconsistent to be worth the slot, but it is a powerful effect to resolve it and to discard I think you discard a light, so you could discard Catsith and then bring back a Chaos Sorcerer. So don't get me wrong, powerful card. I just don't think it's consistent enough.
It's a lot of setup.
Yeah.
It's like Sork plus Kinka into Valor. Or into Valor or Catsith. Yeah.
So it is doable, don't get me wrong.
Because it has to be with 2 non-tuners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Trish to round things out. For the Synchros, the Tour Guide cards, we are running Leviar, and Leviathan. You can very reasonably cut a Leviar for like a Utopia if you're playing against a Hero Beat or something that's running triple T-King, just so you can summon your own and then make like a Utopia or something with it to get rid of it.
Like Minecon or like the Trags and stuff, yeah.
Or you could cut this Chimeratech, but since you're maining a Cyber Dragon, I still feel like it's probably worth including.
It's a good out to Catastor.
Yeah. So it's up to you. It's definitely a flex spot. I do not think there's really much that you could reasonably cut in the Synchro lineup. Maybe the Unicore, if you just don't feel like it's consistent enough to go for, considering it's typically Catsith and then like a Tour Guide. But I will leave that up to you just as an option. Utopia is probably a pretty good one to consider. And here is a sample side deck. Don't by any means take this as biblical for this deck, but additional Cyber Dragon to help with aggro matchups. Third T-King to help with Hero Beat or TG Stun or something else that's slow and annoying, or another Chaos deck to get rid of their Chaos monsters. Double Maxx for fast decks. Double DD Crow because it's good friends with Piper and it just hurts a lot of graveyard setup decks. A lot of decks are cutting this now, but considering, with Gravekeeper in mind, but considering how much synergy this card has with the deck being a level 1 and a discard whenever you want Dark, I think it's still worth including. That is it for the monsters. Spells. I mentioned Gravekeepers being a pain in the butt already. Here's the card that we tried to find to help with that. Leeching the Light for agents. And then triple MST is here in the side deck. They're not... I've debated whether or not these should be Royal Decree. Excuse me. But ultimately, I think MST is more flexible, and you do still kind of want to resolve your trap cards. Like you could arguably side out some of your traps and then side in some decrees and keep like a few Wing Blasts.
Yeah, save with losing the Wing Blast and stuff like that, yeah.
But Wing Blast is a key piece of synergy for this deck. So ultimately, MST is more realistic and flexible in my opinion, but Decree is an option for you to consider also. And rounding it off for traps, 2 Karma Cuts and a Needle Sealing. I just like Needle Sealing. I have a personal bias towards it. It's good against aggro, which this deck kind of suffers against. Just fun. It's definitely a flex slot if you want to put in something else. Karma Cuts are good against decks that have multiples and multiples of good cards. I find it to be good against Chaos. God forbid you ever run into a Frog Monarch player. This card can absolutely eat their Treeborns as long as they're not on Lancer. It's a flexible removal option if you need to actually remove a monster from the game rather than top deck it. I like it. You, again, definitely kind of a personal preference kind of thing. You can swap it out if you want to. But that's about it. I love Piper. I love the advantage it generates. And this variation of it is able to pressure your opponent in a lot of ways that traditional Piper isn't. And going forward, I think this is probably my preferred variant of Piper.
Do you think you put it in tier 1 or close to it?
It's close. If it draws well, yes, but it doesn't always.
Everything.
So
you can draw BLS and every deck's good.
I would say its floor is tier 2, and it can definitely perform like a tier 1 deck at times. So I don't know, if you're into tier 1.5, I'd put it there, but otherwise I'd probably home it in tier 2 conservatively. It's a good deck in tier 2 though.
That's fair. Thanks for watching, guys.